Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 69.
Nice.
Is that that's like what you have to say on the internet, right? When anything happens that turns up the number 69.
That is absolutely correct. Anytime the number 69 comes up in any conversation or any post or any Twitter feed, it's just nice. Barack Obama tweeted during his presidency that some stat was at 69%, and the list of comments is just one word for pages and pages of people responding with nice.
Nice. When I was a kid, the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure came out, and that was the way that Keanu Reeves and Alex Winters verified the identity of their alternate selves.
Yes, from the future. I recall this scene very distinctly because they said 69, dude.
What number am I thinking of right now? So as a kid, as a 10-year-old kid when that movie came out, that meant absolutely nothing to me.
I remember turning to my parents and be like, "What does that mean?" And my dad goes, "Oh, and
Yeah,
and then
same.
like just completely blew it off and just okay, watch the movie.
My best friend and I, a couple of Mormon boys, used to see each other and we would greet each other that way. Dude, what number am I thinking of right now? 69, dude. And if my parents even knew what that meant, they probably just rolled their eyes and thought, they don't know what that means.
Well, I'm sure that your parents knew what it meant, Ben, because as you're so fond of saying, every generation thinks they're the ones that have invented sex, and that's just patently not true. I did do a bunch of research on this week's episode show number, if you would like me to go into detail.
Can you keep it PG?
Can I keep it PG? Yes.
All right, go for it.
Okay. So the position itself, listeners were referring to a position that two consenting adults might do in the bedroom area. Ask your parents. The position itself is described in the Kama Sutra, which dates back to 400 BCE.
Wow.
So we have written evidence that people were doing this a while back. The actual term 69 comes from the French phrase, which, funny enough, is just French for 69, which is souvent neuf. I'm sure I got that wrong. Our French-speaking audience can leave comments in the show notes.
They will.
I don't care. That phrase, the earliest time that phrase was written down was in a book called, I don't know if we're going to get demonetized for this. You can bleep me out if you want to. The book was titled Whore's Catechisms, and it was published in the 1790s in France.
Wow.
I have no idea what that book is about, but I want a copy. So the
French
position
making their contributions to culture and society.
So apparently Indians, actual people from the continent of India, discovered and or invented and or cataloged the position that is 69 in the Kama Sutra, and then it was verily named by the French in the late 1700s.
So the Indians discovered it, the French canonized it.
Like all things that are in that general realm, we leave to the French to tell the rest of the world how to do the love stuff correctly.
Nice. All right, I have a follow-up. So I had a listener who's kind of been going through the back catalog reach out to me, and there was something you and I had speculated on in episode 55. We were talking about radio stations, old ways that we used to listen to music. We were talking about streaming services. And I actually have a friend who is a radio DJ, or was in the past, was a professional radio DJ. And you had speculated something to the effect of, it seems like whenever I'm flipping through the radio stations, that all the radio stations are playing commercials at the same time.
Right.
He said we were right and wrong on that. We're right in that, yes, they are all playing commercials at the same time, but wrong in that it's not a conspiracy to make you listen to ads. It's for a completely different reason.
Okay. The only thing that comes to my mind is that they're all owned by the same corporate masters, and it's dictated that thou shalt play commercials at these times.
Yeah, it's even weirder than that. So apparently there's like a rating service, and the way they calculate ratings is by quarter hours. And so if a listener is listening at the end of a quarter hour and at the beginning of a quarter hour, it counts for 2 shares. So they divide up their ad breaks so that someone will listen across the quarter hour.
How did they know I'm listening to the radio? My radio isn't reporting to anybody.
I'll have to ask him again, but that's all I got out of this one is that, yes, they do all play ads at the same time, and it's for a reason.
Are they just listening real hard and seeing who's got what station tuned in on Jeff and the Jazzy Jazz? Like, I don't get it.
I assume it's the same way they used to do it with television ratings. They have Nielsen families, people with some type of device that volunteer as a represented portion of the population. Then they monitor your usage and then multiply that by the number of people they estimate are listening.
Okay, so here's the thing, Ben. I've always been concerned about this Nielsen family idea because, yes, that I get the concept and it has to be the way that they do it. But have you ever met a Nielsen family?
No, I haven't, but I distinctly remember an episode of the Roseanne show where they became a Nielsen family. Did you ever see that?
That's TV people talking about TV. So no, I never saw that episode, but that's not my point.
No,
my point
it's the same thing with anything like that where you're taking representative sample of the population. Like when they give a Gallup poll on who's going to vote for the next president, did they call you?
All I'm saying is, if it's supposed to be a representative sample of the population, shouldn't you have at least have heard of somebody that did it once?
That feels like a logical fallacy that you're saying. Here, the way I process it mentally is that I assume that if this is information that's used to make corporate decisions about listenership that lead to how much a company pays a radio station for advertising, there must be some degree of scientific validity to it.
Or an elaborate smokescreen of scientific validity and like 6 dudes back in a room saying, all right, whose stocks can we manipulate with faulty data this month?
I'm going Occam's razor on this one.
It's just easier to actually have people that are listening.
Right.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that.
Okay. I have a story to tell you about something that happened this week. So, probably better than most people, that occasionally, while your job as an officer in the military is to do your primary duty, and since I am a cyberspace operations officer, I do things related to computers and networks and that kind of stuff. But every now and then, something happens where you're just turned into a pure action officer, where you're like a project runner for something that really doesn't have anything to do with your primary area of expertise.
I remember running a change of command ceremony that actually drove me to drinking.
Precisely. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Do you have anything you want to share from that experience?
Yeah, I did not drink alcohol before that experience. And
explain to our audience what a change of command ceremony is and what your role was.
I think I've explained this specific instance before, but I will again.
Have you?
I think so. But basically, a change of command is where there is a commander of some level. In this case, it was a group, so there was several squadrons. So we're talking upwards of like 1,000 people that this guy's going to be in charge of. And a new one is coming in and the old one is going out. And they have a big ceremony with as many people as they can get into a room, and they do a big formal presentation of handing the flag of the other
Imagine a very formal military tradition where you have a commander of 1,000 troops turning over his command to the next commander of these 1,000 troops.
Right. Well, big events like that don't just happen because somebody's got to organize the transportation for the VPs to and from. Somebody's got to get the space. Somebody's got to make sure the space is set up correctly. Somebody's got to send out the schedule. Somebody's got to schedule the rehearsals.
You got to do a dry run, yeah.
Multiple dry runs with key personnel. And then, so I was working my butt off making all of these little background pieces happen. And then on the dress rehearsal was the only time the actual 2 commanders came in to go through the dry run. And the outgoing commander changed half of the things that I had planned on the day before it was supposed to happen.
Okay, and that's a theme. I'll come back to that.
Okay. So yes, after I then, spent many, many hours and many, many phone calls and stress, and we got through the ceremony, I got home and I looked at my now wife and I said, I want to get drunk. Please take me somewhere to drink alcohol.
Okay, good. Great. That sets this up perfectly. So about 2 months ago, I got notified that the Stratcom J6 wanted to come to our base to tour, meet with all of the people functionally that she had relationships with, and spend a couple of days at our base.
Hey, everybody, King Nerd's coming. We need a nerd to walk him around.
Yes, exactly. So I want to back up a couple of steps. So anyone that's familiar with like the Iran hostage crisis in the late 70s, I always go here. The Iran hostage crisis in the late 70s is this great microcosm and precipitating event that showed that the military had gotten really bad at working together as a joint force. So you had Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. They all had different capabilities. They all had different leadership structures. They all had different things they brought to the fight. But when it actually came time to cooperate, work together, and achieve an objective, they were terrible at it. So Congress and the president said, forget it. We're changing the way the military works so that this never happens again, because it was embarrassing and destructive and really bad.
People died. U.S. service members died and did not accomplish anything.
Yeah, and terribly embarrassed the United States and ruined our international credibility on our ability to conduct those kinds of operations. So they said, all right, we're going to let you guys still be Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines and do your own thing. But when it comes time to actually fighting the wars, what we're going to do is we're going to appoint a 4-star. Doesn't matter which branch they're from. We're going to give them all the forces from all the branches and let them be in charge of them. So they divided the whole globe into geographic combatant commands, Northern Command, Southern Command, Central Command, European Command, Pacific Command. And then for anything that didn't fit in a specific geographic area, they assigned them to functional commands, Transportation Command, later Cyber Command, and one called Strategic Command. Strategic Command, United States Strategic Command, is headquartered in Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska, and they're in charge of all the military stuff happening in space and our nuclear deterrence mission.
Just a couple of side things. Real small, no worries, it's fine.
Right. So the 4-star that's there at that base is in charge of those missions, and all the forces that do those missions are presented to that commander, and then he uses them. So there's been a lot of emphasis on them lately, as we've probably since the end of the Cold War reached the first inflection point there's been in quite some time where there's actual real threat of potential use of nuclear weapons somewhere in the world. The doomsday clock has ticked closer to midnight once again.
Yeah. Yeah, we are still living in that world.
So, like any command staff in any of the branches of the military or any of the combatant commands of the military, they have a staff that's segmented into functional segments that do different things. They're the same on every one. Personnel, intelligence, operations, logistics, plans, and communications, and some other stuff. Anyway, the person that's in charge of communications is on a 4-star staff is a 1, 2, or 2-star level leader in charge of lots of people. So this person at Strategic Command in Nebraska happens to be a civilian, but they're the equivalent of a 2-star general. So
King Nerd for all the nukes.
But for all the comm systems for all the nukes.
That's the nukes.
So when you hear people talk about the nuclear football that the president carries, yeah, if he ever used that, this person is the person whose troops and things and stuff are making that happen so that our response is appropriately timely.
No comm, no bomb, baby. Woo!
That's it. That's exactly it. So that person said, hey, I recently took command here. The 3 legs of the nuclear triad are the bombers, the missiles, and the submarines. Barksdale Air Force Base happens to have bombers and the people in charge of the bombers and the missiles. So I want to go there. So she spoke to the senior communicator at my base, the senior cyber officer, and said, hey, I want to come. And he said, great, I need an action officer. And he turns around and points at me.
You, nerd.
You nerd. King Nerd is coming. Get everyone together. So this is a really nebulous kind of thing that you have to do. Like, there's no checklist per se. I can go to the protocol office and they can tell me what kind of things are appropriate to do for a 2-star level civilian, but really when it comes to like what do I do with them once they get here, it could be anything. So I start communicating with her staff. I can't talk to her directly. That's not that's not allowed. What does she want to do when she gets here? What does she want to see?
You can't just ask her like, hey, ma'am, what do you want to do while you're here? No, you can't do that. You have to infer and intuit all of these things, like a good action officer does.
So this is one of those things where I do the best I can. I get maybe 2 or 3 chances to check with them, and maybe one good chance where it will go up to her. She'll look at it and say, "No, this isn't what I'm looking for." So here's the train wreck that happened.
Tell me that you arranged for a tour in the previously classified underground tunnels that you could explore with the backup military base in it.
This base is nowhere near as cool as my base in England. Okay, so just like you described in your change of command ceremony, how the only time the actual commander came to the ceremony, he changed like half of what you were doing. It was kind of like that. So 3 months ago, I had like 3 months notice. Hey, she's going to come on this date, start getting everything ready. It got closer and closer and closer, and I could tell based on political things and other things that were happening, it wasn't going to happen. So I kind of lightened up on the planning.
So can I just point out for a second, you said 3 months ago you had 3 months notice. It would be weird if 3 months ago you had 6 months notice, but we'll move on from that.
Yeah, sorry. I'm being redundant.
No, I'm being a jerk. Welcome to the Bad Magic Podcast, everybody.
So about a month and a half passes, and for whatever reason, the visit got postponed. But nobody said, we're not coming. They just said, not yet. So I get busy doing other things at work. I'm not worried about that. I kind of just put aside the planning that was transferable and stopped thinking about it. So about 3 weeks ago, the protocol office says, hey, have you heard back from them on when she's planning to come again? I'm like, I don't know. I'll check, because they're the ones who get paid to think about this. I wasn't thinking about it. So I reach out to them and like, oh, yeah, we're coming in 2 weeks.
Hey, thanks for the heads up, guys.
Yeah. So I go into emergency mode, but it's probably best this way because, there's just a lot of painful stuff that happens. And when you run out of time to like change it all last minute, you just have to go ahead with what you got.
In the immortal words of Calvin and Hobbes, the work time is more stressful, but there's less of it.
Right. So there was enough time, I think, to do a good job, but not so much time that you could second guess everything and turn a lot of work into a lot of work.
Okay.
So I'm planning all of it, and I'm laying out this agenda. They're basically going to be on the ground for a day and a half. They're going to come around noon, stay that evening, come back the next day, and leave the following evening. So I have to plan, and you're probably doing all this in your head already. I have to plan their lodging arrangements, a dinner, many stops on this agenda tour, breakfast, lunch, and then get them to the airport to get out of here on time.
And like each one of these stops, like, yeah, they want to see something that's important, but they don't just want to pop in and be like, oh, hi, everybody, I'm just looking around. That's not how that works. You can't just have a 2-star show up at somebody's shop without telling the guy who's in charge first.
They want to know you're coming. They want to have a high-ranking person there to meet them. They want to know what you want to say to them while they're there, and et cetera, et cetera.
What a nightmare.
Yeah. So I planned all this out, and there were a few things, like you said, that they weren't clear to me exactly what had to happen, so I was making some assumptions. And I was planning for her to have what's called an office call with the 4-star. That is, just pop in and chat for a half hour. I've never been in the room for one of those. I don't know what happens. But usually I'm guessing when a 4-star talks to a 2-star, it's very strategic and very first-name friendly.
I imagine that there is some kind of high-class alcohol that is consumed, and they sign the literal death warrants for at least a handful of people.
Right. Very good. I appreciate you filling in the blanks because I didn't know what happened in that meeting, so now I know. So at the base where I'm at, there's lots of people with stars on their shoulders, and I'd started filling in these office calls when I had lots of notice, but their schedules are usually very set in stone, and you need a lot of advance notice to get on their schedules. So there's a 4-star, there's a 2-star, and there's a 1-star that I'd kind of tried to plan in visits for.
I mean, you say that they're tight, but like, it's funny how if you were to call their execs, their secretaries, and be like, hey, by the way, 2-star equivalent from the command staff is coming, be like, oh, miraculously, time got cleared off the schedule somehow.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it was like, but it was cramming all the afternoon stuff we were going to do. We were going to run around the base and see the satellite communications and crawl around inside of a B-52 and stuff like that, and it was just getting so crunched that they were going to miss their flight on the way out. So I was finally like, does she really need to talk to the 4-star? So I called the 4-star's office.
Oh, Ben. Ben. Of all the things to call and try to cancel. Come on, man.
So I took that off the agenda. The 2-star, he didn't want to meet with her either, and that was taken off the agenda. And on Friday, before she's going to be here the next Tuesday, they send it to her over the weekend. On Monday morning, I come in, and in my inbox, there's an email from her exec that says, she wants to meet with the 4-star and the 2-star. You've got one day to plan it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I honestly feel like the old knight on Raiders of the Lost Ark. You chose poorly.
Yeah. Well, the emergency actually helped, so we turned what was going to be kind of a lunch into a working lunch. We basically took the lunch out of their schedule, and they were open to it because there was so little time to plan it. All right, all that stuff's boring. All the meetings happened. Everything went fine. Then they arrive. She met with the 1-star, and then we had what's called a no-host social plan for that evening. and that is they didn't want to have someone in charge and have like a formal meeting at someone's house where someone was speaking. It was just like everyone show up at a restaurant, we'll have an informal chat. So I picked a restaurant. I looked it up on the internet. It was a local place that people like that it's like Cajun Creole food, and it was open. I did not call the restaurant to confirm that it was open.
Oh, Ben.
And the night of, the first person shows up to the restaurant and calls me and says, "It's closed."
So the fact that you are still alive means you pulled a rabbit out of your hat. So, like, what do you do in this nightmare scenario?
Okay, so this is where, like, I didn't know. I was doing things all along and I didn't know I was doing them, and all of a sudden they were very handy. And that is, even though this was a formal show up, casual dress kind of thing, I'd written down the names of everyone who said they wanted to go.
Okay.
So because I had that list of people, as soon as I got this news, I had about 30 minutes notice, and I was able to pick another location that was only about 5 minutes from the first location, tell the official party to meet us there, and then start calling all the guests that were going to meet them there. And by the time it was supposed to start, everybody was at the new place.
Tell me it was Hooters. Tell me you sent the 2-star and all the VIPs to Hooters.
Crap! The place is close. What do we do? What's close? This looks good. They serve wings. Let's go.
The female 2-star equivalent. All right, no, for reals though. Where did you send them?
It was just a casual taco place.
That's outstanding.
Anyway, the next morning they got there. We got all their office calls in, went through their whole agenda. When they're done, all's well that ends well. They got back, and her staff officer sent me a note and said it was a home run. So I'm glad that's finally over. It's definitely like a really stressful kind of thing to try to plan all of that and get it done, as you know. But yeah, I'm satisfied now that it's over.
So is this the conversation where you ask me, is this finally it? Or do you want me to take you out drinking, Ben? Because I can take you out drinking and just purge this entire experience from your memory. I promise.
Well, I think another current event besides that we can key in on is this past Sunday was the annual Academy Award ceremony, the Oscars in Hollywood.
Oh, Ben.
Which might have gone on without notice, except for one incident that will stand out in the annals of Oscar history.
So, I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but I cannot handle like awkwardness when I see it, like from a distance, even if it's not happening to me. So
this was distilled awkwardness down to its essence.
My wife will attest that we were watching the first season of The Office, and I would frequently get up and leave the room from physical discomfort of the situations on the show.
Were you watching the Oscars live, or did you just hear about it after the fact?
We were in the past tense watching the Oscars live, but then we're like, this is boring. Let's watch a show that we want to watch. And we switched over to something else, and the kids were there, and we watched Survivor or something. But then I was doom scrolling on my phone later, and like, of course, Reddit just exploded with some news about Will Smith. And so I'm like, oh, hey, something happened on the Oscars. And then we pulled it up on the YouTube on the TV and watched it live. And I was like holding myself like the victim of trauma. Like I was so like uncomfortable watching it.
Yeah. So it has become known as, and probably not incorrectly, the slap heard round the world.
Is that what the internet's calling it?
There's so much weirdness swirling around this. So first of all, you had Chris Rock hosting the Oscars, and I don't envy that person. You know, Billy Crystal, probably the best host of the Oscars ever in history, but he can't do it every year, and he's getting old. So they got to find somebody else in the years that Billy's not doing it. And Chris Rock has done it this year, and he's doing okay, I guess. But he makes this really lame joke because Will's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, has got alopecia or something. She's starting to lose her hair, and she's shaved her head, and she looks very elegant with a female shaved head.
Yeah. That's a thing. Like, people can pull it off, and she's one of those people.
Either Chris or his writers wrote in some lame joke about his wife preparing to do G.I. Jane 2. The film G.I. Jane came out back in, the late 90s, early 2000s. Famously beautiful actress Demi Moore had shaved her head for the role and played this buff Army...
Navy.
It was Navy?
It's Navy
Then why'd they
SEALs.
call it G.I.? Lame.
you know why. Corporate, whatever. All right, so
Okay, so Chris makes this lame joke. It really throwaway joke. Oh, look, she has short hair. And apparently Will Smith is sitting there seething and then wins the Oscar for Best Actor.
We had, of course, every workplace in America debated this for the first hour of work on Monday. So first of all, Will Smith cost the U.S., like the GDP,
productivity
took an actual like tiny dip because of the amount of time wasted talking about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock.
Even my seminary class wanted to talk about it, and they never want to talk about stuff.
Well, they're teenagers, and it's 6 a.m. I'm surprised they're vertical.
Yeah.
This is what I told my workplace. Like as a general rule for me that I try to go by is, you don't make fun of people for things that they can't control. Like if it's outside of their scope of control, that's not fair. Like you can't, like that's just life being mean to them, and you're just piling on to it. It doesn't matter what
existence as a comedian.
Make fun of Will Smith for being, I don't know, a bad rapper, but don't make fun of his wife
for having
losing
big
her
ears.
hair.
Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, exactly. Like if you can't control it, then that's not fair to just tack on. Like it's already unfair. Why are you tacking on?
Okay. So Chris Rock makes a lame joke. Everyone forgot about it the second he said it. The only reason anyone even remembers the joke is because of what happened next. The slap heard round the world.
Will Smith gets up and starts walking down the lane, and I think the entire audience thought it was a bit. I really do, because everybody started kind of giggling, like, "Oh, they like pre-planned a thing or whatever." And Chris Rock like put both of his hands behind his back and stood there and said, "Uh-oh," and waited as he approached, and got slapped. And
yeah, so Will Smith waits till he's like one step away and then just does a quick drawback so there was no chance to block it or know it was coming, and just nails him.
And then he walks back, and everybody in the audience and everybody that got slapped at the moment, everybody was just stunned. Everybody was stunned. Nobody knew what to do.
If this had been 10 years ago, we might have just had to speculate about what was said on stage. But apparently this is the new age and the internet, and there was a feed out there of the actual audio stream where what Will Smith said had been recorded, and that got out there. And it was not what you would say if you were doing a bit or making a joke.
No, yeah. I've heard the audio that came out after that, and it's Will Smith yelling at the top of his lungs in a silent auditorium full of Hollywood's like elite, "Keep my wife's name out your mouth." And he said it like the first time he said it, I was cringing. Like a whole body tremor went through me because I just like, oh, that's so awkward. And then he said it again, and like, Ben, why? Just stop.
So I can't even begin to plumb the depths of the psychology of what was happening there. And people have attempted, because Will Smith was very publicly embarrassed when his wife cheated on him with another man. I have no idea what's going on in their marriage and what precipitated the emotions he was feeling in that moment. Maybe there was something going on between him and Chris. No idea.
The best response I've heard to it was some random Twitch streamer that I was watching the other day. And they said, did Chris Rock deserve it? Yes. Should Will Smith have done it? No. And I think that's probably the best response.
Yeah, I mean, we live in an age, and it's not a new thing, where we roast celebrities. And they have to sit up there on stage and just listen to people completely, roast them for an hour. And it's considered a virtue among these kinds of positions to be able to laugh at yourself or, jokes about these kinds of things. I do not know, because I didn't think of Will Smith as the kind of person that couldn't take a joke. Or let a bad joke just go.
It's different, though, when it's about someone you love. Like, you can take a bad joke about yourself a lot better than you can take a bad joke about somebody that's very close to you. Like, if somebody made fun of Alicia for something that they thought was innocuous, but you, having that private information on the backside, know that this is actually a huge problem for her in her life, and she has
maybe
huge
something she's very
about
sensitive about.
Yeah, exactly. Then you would also have a very over-the-top reaction.
Got it. So then it would be a bit of a show to like show the other person that you're defending them, making that. Well, and that had to be what was happening.
That's the thing, is like Will Smith felt in the moment that he needed to do something to respond to this. Now, let's talk about for a second the literal infinite number of ways that you can handle this situation that are better than what he did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of hay made over the fact that if you had changed any of the race or gender roles of either of those two people, police are coming.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a man committed assault on live television and then received a standing ovation by receiving an award not 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
That's there's so many different things that Will Smith could have done in that moment, but he took what could have been the worst. There's only a handful of things that could have been worse. I mean, he could have literally killed Chris Rock on stage, but that wouldn't have been any better. He could have, if he had the presence of mind, like wrapped his arm around his shoulder and gave a very eloquent speech about alopecia affects millions of people around the world and they struggle with it. Well, and that really would have made Chris Rock look like an a-hole.
Right. Then it would have reflected poorly on Chris instead of on Will. Yeah,
exactly. So there are other things he could have done, but it was just adrenaline. It was pure adrenaline that made him get up out of his seat. And then as soon as he stood up, he's committed. It doesn't matter what happens after that. He has to do something.
So that he was out of turn? Is that why you said that Chris was kind of surprised by it?
Oh, Chris was surprised by it.
I didn't realize that part. I didn't realize at that moment when he went up on stage, he wasn't like a co-presenter or something like that. He was not expected on stage at that point.
No, he got up out of his seat in the audience and like approached Chris Rock. None of that was scripted. Chris Rock was supposed to continue with whatever his jokes were going to be for the next award.
Okay. I don't really have anything else to say about that. Other than that, I'm interested to see what the long-term fallout will be on Will Smith's career. Is this a case, will he be canceled, or is this a case of all publicity is good publicity?
The second one. Because like he gave his speech, it was fine. He resigned from the Academy. Chris Rock's not pressing charges. This is going to be one of those things that a month from now, we'll see Will Smith and Chris Rock on a special on a TV or some YouTube video together somewhere, and everybody will forgive everyone for it.
Yeah, I've seen Chris Rock has had a big bump in popularity for it. He had a live performance. I think his tickets took like $1,000 jump in prices.
I heard an audio clip from his next stand-up tour, like immediately after that happened, and like the first thing he said when he came out on stage was, "So how was everybody else's weekend?"
Yeah, and I saw a thread on Reddit where people were speculating what his first joke was going to be, and some people were like, "Nice try, Chris. We're not writing your comedy for you." But I saw some really good ones on that thread. Link in the show notes. There's another thing that's happening right now kind of in the social media sphere that's kind of interesting. Josh, are you tracking the second iteration of Reddit's r/place?
No, I'm not. Oh, okay. Is that yeah, I know what this is. Is that going on right now?
Yeah. It just started on April Fool's Day. It's going for 3 days and it'll be done. So it'll be over by the time this comes out. It's still happening right now if you want to check it out. It is fascinating. And I think that and this both relate to what we're going to talk about today. So let me give you just the quick explanation of it. So a year ago, Reddit did this experiment where they put this giant blank canvas up, and then they allowed anybody that registered to go onto this giant blank canvas, and you could select one pixel on the canvas and change the color of it, and then your account was locked for 5 minutes.
Yes, and what's so fascinating about this, and like that sounds innocuous. Like, oh, so people can randomly put stuff up onto this blank canvas. It's just going to be static, right? Wrong. Because this is one of those weird things of spontaneous internet culture where people group together in just the weirdest ways. And there are coordinated actions to try to make, all right,
yes,
guys, we are claiming these pixels, and these pixels will be the flag of Denmark if we have to die for it.
So we need 20,000 people. Everyone gets one pixel. Go.
Yes, and they get assignments, and they break down schedules, and like it's crazy the spontaneous communities that emerge. And I remember watching a bunch of like fast-forwarded clips of last year's r/place.
Yeah, of like contested portions of the canvas.
There was a movement called r/void where these people signed up and like, we are going to make this entire thing black if it kills us. And you can watch it like pop up like cancer on the r/place, and then immediately get quashed by the other communities trying to replace it with whatever logo they were.
They're back. The r/void is back. But it's interesting because they don't last. They kind of burn out. They come in, they make this big black thing with a monster face on it, and then it gets eaten up by the coordinated movements that are specifically dedicated to a certain part of the canvas. So at some point in the next 24 hours, this thing will come to an end, and then it'll all be over. But that endless rehashes, and this thing is great because there's so much data. It's just, every single time a person goes on this canvas and changes the color of a pixel, that's registered, and now we have 3 days worth of data of like 1.5 million people changing the color of pixels on this limited canvas.
Even if you're not into computer stuff, even if you think social media is stupid, I would encourage you to watch one of those 5-minute YouTube videos about r/place, because it is such a fascinating, weird internet thing.
It really is. All right, speaking of weird internet things, something big happened this week for the Bad at Magic podcast. Now, if you've been listening to Bad at Magic podcast for a while, or you're listening now, you have chosen some type of place on the internet where you can access our podcast. Whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of those, or even our website. There have been requests from listeners for us to offer it in one additional place. There was a bit of a technological and time-based hurdle. We finally jumped over it, and the Bad at Magic podcast, all 68 episodes up till this one, are now available on our YouTube channel. Link in the show notes.
That's excellent work. And everyone, I'm actually hearing this for the first time too, so Ben, I can only weep for the upload bits that you suffered through trying to get all this stuff onto the YouTube.
I did. I got to admit, Josh, about 2 months ago, I went through this where I set the static image, I imported the MP4, I rendered it in my 3D video creation application and uploaded it to YouTube. And the commitment of time to do those two things was so significant, I was completely demoralized and not willing to do it anymore. So there was one episode sat up there on an unlisted video on YouTube for 3 months. Last week, my second oldest son, Jairus, who is the composer of our bumper music and our transition music, finished his full-time missionary service and was looking for something to do. So I outsourced it.
Idle hands. Hey, kid, are you busy? No? I've got a job for you.
So for those of you out there in our audience that would prefer to partake of the episodes of Bad at Magic on YouTube, that is now available.
I feel like that should be a Bad at Parenting.
Link in the show notes. Please subscribe to our channel, like the videos, and help. For people who only partake of podcasts on YouTube, you now have an opportunity to give us some love.
Speaking of Bad at Parenting, I actually have a Bad at Parenting that I want to do that I didn't put in the show notes.
That's good, because I want to do Bad at Parenting too. So let's transition to that.
Or whatever the transition music is. Jairus, it's great, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Okay, so this one caught me off guard, and I'm still struggling with it. So, Ben, the CDC has relaxed guidelines for mask use for COVID-19 protocols in basically the whole country. Now, they have a new website now. You can look up your county. I encourage people, if you don't know about it, go take a look. It's good information to have, et cetera, et cetera. And they have color-coded charts based on where you live on how bad, basically, COVID is spreading in your area. And a lot of workplaces are relaxing protocols, or they're deriving their protocols off of what the CDC is saying and the current status and that kind of thing. So with that, we saw in our county that COVID was green for 2 weeks straight. And so we're actually doing good. Phoenix was really bad for a long time, but we're actually starting to recover, kind of like we talked about a few episodes ago, where we really feel like we're rounding this COVID-19 corner.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. My family, like I've said before, we're the last people that are going to come out of this bunker. But we've finally told our kids, we explained the whole situation to them. Everything's getting better. CDC says we've been good for a long time. So if you guys don't need to wear your masks to school anymore. And up until this point, my kids had been wearing masks, like K95 masks, to school every day. And they were in the vast minority. There was only a handful of other kids in the whole school that were doing the same thing.
Okay.
And
wait,
go ahead.
But before you go on, how did they feel about that? Did they ever come back and be like, why do we got to do this? None of the other kids are doing it. Or were they just doing it?
We've been very clear and open and discussing this with our kids from the start, and trying to explain to them and educate them about everything that's going on. And we are doing this because, and these are the reasons, and we're trying to be safe and protect not just ourselves, but other people.
But they're like
et cetera, et cetera.
6 and 9, right?
Well, now they're 10 and 7.
10 and 7.
They were 8 and 4 when this started.
Okay, so they're a little bit at the low end as far as like being able to comprehend the depth of all those things you were just saying.
Yeah, yes, and unfortunately, because this is such a complicated topic, it's difficult to boil it down to where like a 10-year-old can understand the nuance of what's happening here.
Yeah.
So all my kids knew is my daughter has always been fine. My daughter has always been like, why do we have to wear the masks? I don't want to wear the mask. Like, you will wear the mask because I tell you to. And that's the stage of parenting she was in. And so she wore the mask because we told her to. And so then the other day when we told her, you don't have to wear the mask anymore, she's like, great. I think she threw her mask off that second. Like, just chucked it across the room, never to be seen again. But what caught me off guard was my son. Because I took him to school the next day, and he had a lanyard with the mask hooked on, so they could take it off, and it would just hang for when they eat lunch and stuff. I'm like, hey, did you forget you don't have to wear your mask today? He's like, well, no, I still want to wear it.
Wow.
Well, in the moment, we didn't want to like, okay, well, that's fine, it's your choice. But then later, like we were at dinner and we're asking him, so hey, why you don't have to wear the mask anymore? He goes, oh no, I know. Okay, so. But you wore it today. Yeah. Why? And then he got quiet. And listeners, if you don't have kids, when you ask your kid a direct question and they go quiet, there's something there. Like you're it's like, oh, okay, now tingles, right? Like alarm bells. Like, okay, this is something bigger than what we're talking about.
Yeah,
and,
wait, hang on. Before you unpause your life moment here, I assume going through your head are the same things are going through my head. Like, did I instill in him too much fear and now he's afraid to take it off? Or does he understand it so profoundly he's just made a personal life decision that this is the way he wants to live now?
Yeah, exactly. These are all the questions that I'm asking myself. And so apologies to Carter if you're listening to this in the future, which I doubt. But I'm going to boil it down like this. We had this longer conversation, and it came down to he was afraid.
Yeah.
Because from the start of this, we told him, like, we need to not see other people. We need to wear masks. We need to wash our hands constantly. We need to isolate ourselves because we don't want to get this sickness. And apparently, I'm assuming he overheard my wife and I talking about it before, or talking to other people when we were always saying, like, our son had asthma when he was younger. It seems like he's growing out of it, but that's a separate thing.
Right.
So,
but like you said, you guys were the last to come out of the bunker.
Yeah. And so at some point he got the impression that, like, if he gets it, then it's going to be way worse for him than it's going to be for other people. And so there's this.
Weren't you trying to give him that impression?
I mean, yes, but not to the point that it's now a problem.
This was your parenting moment of reckoning.
Yes, exactly. This is the reap what you sow kind of moment. Like,
yeah.
So now I'm kind of like in a place where I'm still trying to explain it clearly as I can and be transparent and give him the information. And we showed him the CDC websites, and we showed him like all of the color-coded charts. And like the reason that we did all these things is because it was so bad.
So you were trying to talk him down in the same way you thought you got him up there.
Yes, and
But you don't really know how you got him up there. Like you said, it could have been one thing he overheard you guys say.
Yeah, so basically it's an ongoing battle because he's still wanting to wear the mask, and I've got to walk the walk, right? So I'm trying to respect his choices.
Right.
And
you don't want to just disrespect the things you said in the first place.
Right, and I'm not just going to call him down like, no, don't wear the mask. You don't have to wear it. That's not what I want to do. I want to empower him in that way to make these decisions. But I'm struggling with the idea, like did I just make him deathly afraid of germs for the rest of his life? So, it like I said, it has not been resolved. It's an ongoing thing. My hope is that in time, like, he'll come down from it on his own as we like encourage and continue to educate and things. But like, I'm not going to force him to do anything. And
that's a tough moment. So did you, Nicole, talk about it later?
A bit, basically.
Was it kind of like the self-inventory, like soul-searching kind of thing? Like, did we do this wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're constantly worried about that because, like, every kid is messed up by their parents, and the only thing we can wonder is how we're going to mess up our kids.
So on Thursday of this week, I picked up my daughter for an orthodontist appointment. She's in 8th grade. I went and picked her up at the school. I signed her out at the office, and she showed up at the office, and she had a mask on.
Okay.
And again, same as your state, we've been out of mask quarantine for a long time. So we went and got in the car, and she's got in the car with me, and she still had it on. And I'm like, you could take your mask off. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. So she took it off, and I was like, why are you still wearing it? And she's like, well, I guess I just got used to people not being able to see my face.
Ooh. That's a whole different level of 8th grade girl problems that could be going on there.
It's like hiding her facial expressions and not having to wear makeup and all completely different reasons that I didn't have anything to do with. I was like, well, you can wear it if you want, I guess.
On the lighter side of this entire discussion, we spent all day yesterday at the soccer fields, like playing soccer. And they were outside, and they're pretty good about they know they don't have to wear masks when they're outside doing stuff, so they weren't wearing masks. But I did notice that my son has a very distinct suntan, where his not only where the mask is, but where the straps go to his ears.
Nice.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So for my bad at parenting segment, I wanted to actually have a discussion with you, as we have in times in the past, where I kind of ask you what your opinions are about things that you haven't really had a time to go through yet. One, that'll get it documented what you think now, and then in a couple years when you've actually had to deal with it, we'll see if your opinion changed. But also, I'm dealing with it right now.
You just want recorded evidence of me being wrong.
Sometimes. So my wife and I, there are some things that we come together and come to consensus on when it comes to parenting the children. There are other things where like, I just let that be her thing. And in our marriage, there's one of those where she just lets it be my thing, and that's money.
Money's tricky with kids because kids have no idea what money is, does, or comes from.
No, they really don't. And my kids probably more so than I ever did. They just don't want for anything. They have a lovely digital device they can access all of human knowledge on. That they live in a comfortable place where they have their own bed and enough food to eat, and they don't really want anything.
Man, my daughter slams that switch into that recharger so hard every time. And every time I'm like, you've got to be gentle with that multi-$100 piece of electronics. And she's like, but I am. Like, but you're not. Like, like you're saying, like your kids, daddy will just get a new one. Or mommy will buy us we'll get it for Christmas. It will just show up magically.
Someone else's problem.
Yep.
Yeah. Like opposed to me when I got my first Super Nintendo at age 14, and I treated that thing like it was made of eggshells. Gently rubbed it with a fiber cloth. Anyway, so what I'm asking though is about allowance. Like, do you, Nicole, currently, or do you plan to in the future give your kids an allowance or something that fills that function?
Currently, we do not do the allowance thing because mostly it's opportunity. The kids don't have opportunity to spend the money, so acquiring it doesn't have any, impact on their life.
Yes.
So I imagine once they get a little more freedom of specifically mobility, like once they can actually go places, like they will start to want for money.
So you've nailed what's at the heart of this issue. My kids have things that want money, particularly, again, as we're going to talk about later, digital objects. They want to buy games off Steam. They want to have money to spend in
in-game
Roblox.
Currency and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. They want money for that, and I'm not willing to give them money for that just for that. However, and this is a problem with being a military family, when we move around, their economic situation changes. In the state of Illinois, they were in a place where they expected children to be involved in financial transactions relating to their consumption of a midday meal.
Oh, they had lunch money? They had to actually pay a teller at the school?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
As opposed to Louisiana, where they've just subsidized all that with property taxes and taken it out in the hands of the kids. If you want lunch, you just go to the cafeteria and get it.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
You see, we're in the middle because our kids just have student IDs and they have an account that we, the parents, have to recharge. Oh, the day we found out my son was buying cookies for other kids. Oh, no, sir, that's not how this works.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that in this podcast. And in Illinois, it wasn't. They also had lunch accounts, but there was just problems with it, like access to it and whatever. And it was just better, at least for some of them. So it creates this uneven situation where some kids need money and some don't. And how do we deal with it?
Okay.
So what I started doing is about when they turned 13 years of age, I'd get them a joint bank account where they have a debit card and then load money into it. And then I can monitor their spending and have visibility of it. And it's worked pretty good so far. But because there's been this uneven situation where sometimes they need money and sometimes they don't, I haven't just kept it like I'm giving you a fixed allowance. So it becomes kind of uneven. And I don't know that we haven't sat down and planned out like a financial management seminar for the kids that we're then building objectives to, so that then the way that we execute our allowance program feeds into our objectives for the things we want kids to learn about being smart with money. Like you said, if they don't need money, they don't care.
Okay. Well, and the money thing has two sides to the coin, and so you've got to attack it from both sides. Is they have to understand the value of money, in that, like, this is a currency that I can use to acquire the things that I want. But then also they have to value the acquisition of the money in the first place. They have to know that when they're spending $5, what they physically have to give up in order to earn that $5.
Yeah, and I'm not willing to do that in a way that I think would really get me into that. Like, if I made it so that their chores acquired money, that then I showed them in a transaction so they understood they were acquiring it, and then the things that they needed in their life required money and they had to spend money to get them, then it would be very deliberate and they'd be learning all those lessons. But man, I just don't have the time or patience to put all that structure into place.
Well, not only that, like, I'm shying away from it from the opposite perspective, from the optimizing or utility standpoint, where it's like the kid then goes, I need to do the dishes in order to earn $2 for my allowance this week. I don't need that $2, so I'm not going to do the dishes. And
right.
now the dishes
they do
don't
that value proposition calculus and just be like, yeah, I'd rather trade the money for the chore.
Yeah, that's so then okay. So hybrid model. You have the baseline chores that must get done. These are just chores that you have to do because you live under my roof and they need to be done. And then you have that list of extra stuff. It's like, hey, you go, I don't know, chop a yard of firewood, and that's $5 or something.
Right. I love how you made that sound offhanded, but you were deliberately doing something that was probably child slave labor.
Now, hang on a second. We say slave labor today. 200 years ago, as soon as a kid could walk, they were picking stones out of fields for sustenance farming. Yeah, so it's all a perspective thing.
That is a bit of presentism. And I won't say how much I paid my 20-year-old to render and upload all those videos. But...
Oh, man. I think, all right, because I know how long it takes to upload a video to YouTube. I'd be willing to spend upward of like $100 to have that off my plate.
Yeah, I was definitely glad to get that off my plate. And now he can just do maintenance, which is a lot better than trying to catch up on 68 episodes. And every time I delay, I was like, oh, man, so much more. Okay, so the problem is we moved and we're in the current situation. Right now what I do is the kids all have debit cards, and when they come to me and ask me for money, I just go on the app on my phone and transfer the money into their account, which is great. I don't got to worry about giving them cash and then giving them too much and expecting change back or having them bring me receipts or anything like that. It's really smooth to just have a dual bank account.
Bringing you receipts? What are you doing? Like operating an old school voucher system? What are you doing in the rich
Kind
household?
of. Don't you remember the story I told you about the time when we were in the BX food court and I had my two sons and I went to a different store than them and I gave them each a $20 and they came back for lunch and they had each spent $20?
Which is outstanding. I actually told that story to somebody the other day because I love that so much. Because the kids didn't say, what can I get for lunch with $20? They said, how much lunch can I get for $20?
That's exactly what they said. I still have that photo. It pops up in my memories on Facebook every now and then. It was like $38.64. I mean, they really maximized that $40 I gave them for lunch.
Dude, that's outstanding. Good job, Michael and Jairus.
Yeah. So I guess okay, you hear people complain a lot in the public space about the things that we don't learn in school. And you understand as well as I do that if you want to teach kids something new, you also have to take something out. And I remember getting vague financial management things in high school where they were talking about balancing checkbooks and investment retirement accounts and those kinds of things. And I just wasn't ready yet to understand that stuff.
Okay, how about this? How about we roll all this up into a mash, into your financial situation, okay? So whenever you transfer money to your kids' accounts, take taxes out of it. And just withhold that 10% for payroll tax. And then when they ask you, it's like, well, that's tax, buddy. Like, if you are expecting to get $20 from me or from your employer, then you just need to know that you're only getting 16 of it. Like, you just need to know that.
Yeah, that sounds nice, except that I usually keep it pretty close to a zero balance, and the things they're coming to me for are like the fee for the choir trip. So I can't not give them enough money minus taxes to pay for the fee.
Well, now we're talking low interest rate loans. Like, they need to be paying you back. Like, if you're not
high interest rate loans.
High interest rate loans. Like, if you're not planning for the future, that's a big part of financial management, is not living paycheck to paycheck, by being able to think about what your expenses are going to be, not today, but next week.
These are great lessons, Josh. And they delve deep, and parents out there, tell me if you can sympathize with this. They go deeply into an area where I've had to dedicate very little time or effort into, and I don't know that I'm willing to go there. I don't know that I'm willing to give up the bandwidth it would take to really teach the lessons you just talked about.
Well, but this is what I'm talking about. You set up the scenario to where the lessons become self-taught. Like, you don't sit them down and tell them about payroll taxes. You don't sit them down and tell them about budgeting and forecasting. You just set the rules the way that the rules are in the real world. And it's like the school of hard knocks, but in this microeconomy that you have full control over. So then if they do come up short for like when they say, hey, I need $20 for the choir trip, I'm like, do you have $20? Like, well, no, I don't have $20. I spent it all. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I have great rates on loans for $20 because your allowance isn't coming up due. And then when they have to be paying you back, or when you're, like, even better, deducting the payments for that $20 from their future paychecks, that's really going to hammer home without you having to do much more work or explanation of how money actually works.
If I have a distant look in my eyes, it's not because what you're saying is boring to me. It's because it's so profound that I can't even wrap my brain around the implications of it. Because right now, my kids are on the path to go out into the real world and not really have much of a clue about these kinds of things, and start learning from the school of hard knocks from scratch at age 18 or 19 or 20.
I'll tell you right now, Ben, I had no idea how money worked until I was in credit card debt in college. And I came to a semester where I got my book allowance and used it to pay off my credit cards, and oh crap, I still need to buy books. That was a rough semester between me and my parents asking for money. And like, anything you can do to stem that off at the before it happens, like, that makes you a better parent. And I you know what, I'm pitching this to you, but I'm liking this more and more, because all it does, like, there's initial setup work and overhead to explain to them, this is the financial menu that you have at the bank of daddy. And like the all of the fallout and the ramifications, I'm not going to explain. That's on you.
Yeah. Now I just want to rant for a second about things that don't have to do with me and the kids. And that is, it feels virtually endless when you have like 3 kids in school and every kid is coming to you for some, t-shirt they need or some choir performance fee or whatever. It's just like one right after the other. They hide it from you. They don't tell you about it at the beginning of the year. All right, this year you're going to have to pay $247.33 over the course of the year for all these things that are going to pop up. No, it's just like, oh, here's another thing that we didn't tell you about.
Man, don't get me started on the way the academic system has evolved in America, because they're constantly surprising us with hidden costs, like materials that the teacher, like, oh, I want to teach this great lesson, but I need you to pay for all of the stuff. Oh, hey, we're doing this great presentation in class, and you need to basically do the whole thing for your kid. Like, I am sick of my elementary school teachers assigning me the parent homework. I'm tired of that.
All right. I'm glad that rant wasn't lost on you.
Definitely not.
It's been a while, Josh, but I want to do a quick board game survivor.
Excellent.
This is a game called Carte, and when I looked it up, this game looks like it came out in the late 90s, but the version we had obviously had been updated. This is not a mainstream game. It's for 2 to 4 players, and it's a cooking-themed game where you the basic mechanics of the win condition are that you are racing to get to the most victory points, and you achieve victory points by successfully cooking recipes. It's similar to maybe like Cooking Mama on the Nintendo DS kind of thing, if you've ever played that.
It sounds a little bit like Point Salad, too.
Yeah, but this one's more of like a traditional board game. You have a bunch of cutesy pieces that represent the recipes and the ingredients that you use to cook the recipes, and then you have a little stove with a pot, and then you put the recipe in the pot, and then you gather the ingredients in the pot until it's cooked, and then you get the points for successfully cooking that recipe.
Okay. And now, is this a competitive game or is this a cooperative game?
It's every man for himself, race to the most victory points.
Oh, so it's kind of like one of those cooking reality shows, but a board game.
Yes. You get points for successfully cooking a recipe. You get an extra point if you cook it perfectly. And whoever has the most points by the time you achieve the level of end of the game wins.
There's mechanics for half butting a recipe. It's like, they won't notice I didn't put or lettuce in the burger.
Okay, so this is what happens: is there are mechanics that add randomness and randomness into it. There's a dice that you roll to turn up your oven, and if you get too high a number, you turn the recipe up too high and you burn it.
I feel like the temperature setting on your oven is the least random part of cooking, but okay.
I know. That's the mechanic of the game. Another is the main mechanic of the game is that the ingredients are contained in these little shakers. And what you do is you turn the shaker upside down over your pot, and then a random number of ingredients come out.
Oh, geez. Okay.
You can get a little bit skilled at it, but mostly it's just random. And inside of the ingredient thing are the core ingredients and salt. And if you oversalt the recipe or add too many of the core ingredients, then your recipe's ruined. You have to throw it out, and then you lose time.
Okay, so there's enough of a random element to make it worth kind of like, this is close enough, I'm going to finish it off.
Yes. And then there's one other thing, and that is that at some point you can choose to cook a crepe. And the crepe is like a mini game where you put it in your pot, and you have to flip it up in the air, and it turns over, and you catch it in the pot. And if either you don't flip it or you don't catch it, then you fail.
Oh, so there's a skill-based mini game?
Yes.
Oh, so if you got really good at flipping tiny plastic crepes, you could just dominate the board?
You can only do it once, but yes, it is. If you can do it reliably, you do have a distinct advantage.
This is why skill-based games are bad for my board games. Stop it.
Yeah, so it's cute. If you like the idea of cooking, it's fun. The cartoons are nice and that kind of thing. It's somewhat complex. I probably wouldn't have any kid below the age of, say, 8 play it, and I think that's what it says on the box. I guess a 6-year-old could probably do it. There's lots of randomness, which kind of evens the playing field a little bit. You can't just be really good at it and dominate. But it's kind of poorly constructed. It feels like the first run of a Kickstarter, which is a really bad thing to say about a game that supposedly came out in the 80s. Like the little stove things kind of fall apart. The dial that you turn on the stove to dial the heat had like a 2-piece rivet that screws, except it screws in the same direction that you turn it. So it either tightens down so tight that you can't turn it anymore, or it loosens and falls apart.
All right, well, both of those complaints are materials. Like that's just like sourcing the construction of this board game to the lowest bidder.
Yeah, and the jars themselves, when you reload them, you can take off the bottom, but sometimes it falls off unexpectedly and all the ingredients fall everywhere, and that just sucks. So I can't give this one a ringing endorsement, but it made the survival, because every time we get it out, we laugh and have a good time, and it's fun for 4 players.
I don't think you've thrown out, like, what, one game?
One game.
Of all the games that you guys have played. And then
I mean, I'd like to think that we don't just buy board games blind, that we have some type of screening process, so the odds of us owning one that just is completely terrible is kind of low.
Okay, well then I challenge you. The next time you go to your local game store to play one of your Magic tournaments, you need to, like, close your eyes, spin in a circle, point your hand, and buy whatever game it is that you're pointing at, and go play it with your friend, with your family.
Warhammer 40K.
Well, you just invested $750 into a 7-hour game. Have fun with that.
All right, Josh, it's time for Bad Logic.
Excellent. And since it's an odd week and I'm the odd one, we are going to do a bias.
All right.
All right, Ben. This week's bias is the Barnum effect. And the card that we got from yourbiases.com, sponsor the podcast, is you see personal specifics in vague statements by filling in the gaps. Ben,
this is an interesting one.
This happens to me all the time. And so specifically, again, this is like whenever somebody says something to you that's kind of generic or kind of like just open-ended, you fill in all the details that you want. This is you heard what you wanted to hear kind of stuff, what we're talking about, okay?
Okay.
I suffer from this effect at least 3 times a week when my wife says innocuous things to me. Hey, what are you doing later? Oh, I don't know. What are you doing later? No, that's not what I'm talking about.
I think that's called the double entendre effect, Josh, but I see where you're going with this.
It's got to be a triple or quadruple entendre in my house, because whenever I get an open-ended question, I'm interpreting it in that way.
Yeah. Well, so the Barnum effect here, the example they give on the card is kind of like fortune tellers or astronomers. Like, this is their bread and butter. They're using vague statements that when you listen to it, you're going to interpret it and think it specifically applies to your life, but really it's just a vague statement.
The fortune cookie thing. I saw a great comic about fortune cookies the other day, and it's the guy was reading the fortune cookie fortune, and it said, "You mistake banalities for wisdom."
That's great. And you get a ponderous look on your face and do a double take at the piece of paper and be like, wait a minute.
It takes a second before you're like, oh, that's very, wait a second. Ah, you got me, fortune cookie.
Nice. For Bad at English this week, Josh, I have an interesting one.
Okay.
I had a friend that was having a conflict with their neighbor, and they said to me, I think I need to go have a ding-dong with the neighbor. I'm like, a what?
So you called the police immediately.
A what with your neighbor?
Excuse me, sir, my children are present.
Have a ding-dong. Well, this apparently dates back to the mid-16th century, so I thought, it couldn't be electronic, but apparently it actually relates to bells, and the usage that the British use it for is to having a fierce argument or a fight.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
I just assumed that he meant he was going to go over, ring his bell, and like sit down and have tea and crumpets with him while they discussed it politely.
No,
like civilized
this
gentlemen.
very much means a fierce argument or fight. So it has a noun form and an adjective form. So that you could call it a ding dong, meaning a fight, or you could say we had a ding dong of a fight, which means it was a fierce fight.
Okay.
So some sample sentences might be, that was a bit of a ding dong going on inside the pub, which I'd assume would mean like dishes being broken and chairs being thrown.
Soccer hooligans. Happens all the time.
I need to go have a ding-dong with the neighbor, like I said before. Or his description of his wife's quirks on his podcast led to a bit of a ding-dong of a row.
Is this the part where you're going to publicly apologize for all of the crap you said about Alicia in the last podcast?
So in episode 68 of the Bad at Magic podcast, I did a Bad at Husbanding segment where I did something that bad husbands do, and I talked about one of my wife's quirks.
Did I call it? Did I totally call it? Are you having to apologize right now?
And the quirk that I chose to talk about is the way that my wife determines whether things are dirty or clean. And you can listen to 68 if you want to hear all that. I asked her about it after she listened to the podcast because she hadn't brought it up on her own. And she's like, you really over-exaggerated it.
I did it. I predicted the future. Alicia,
did.
you married such a jerk. I'm so sorry for you.
I don't even know how to undo it other than I really over-exaggerated it.
You can't put that genie back in the bottle. You can't talk about all like...
Okay, I'll give one example.
Okay.
So my wife doesn't like to wear wet clothing. And I said if she drips water on her pants that she'll go change. That's an exaggeration. It takes 2 drips.
Ben, put down the shovel. Listeners, if you haven't heard 68 in a minute, like I specifically pointed this out. I knew you were going to have to come on the podcast and like say something to that effect because of pointing out all this stuff about your wife. You can't rant about how you think your wife is crazy for 15 minutes and not expect to hear back about it.
Let's just say it didn't result in a ding-dong.
Double entendre again. Good job, buddy.
So for our main segment today, Josh, you and I had traded texts with each other over an article that Wizards of the Coast posted relating to one of their online offerings for Magic the Gathering called Magic the Gathering Arena. Now, this was a fascinating article in that they kind of made a public admission of one of the imperfections of their bit of software and were reservedly so, but somewhat candid about the limitations and proposed a solution.
So all right. So our main topic is about a lot of different things, but specifically about this article. This was Wizards of the Coast, like saying on the surface, it was them like, oh, well, we're here to support the community and we're out for our players and trying to grow the player base.
It was a poof sandwich.
It was a poof sandwich, but like underneath, like the subtext was basically them flipping on sunglasses and being like, what are you going to do about it? Like, there's nothing we can do.
There was a little bit of candidness in there. Now, hang on. Before we start, I want to do a bit of a ground rule, Josh. I want to have this discussion, but I want to try to have it in a way that our moms won't be completely tuned out. So I want to talk about this in a way where I feel like they can understand what we're talking about.
All right. So here's what we're going to do then, Ben. Let's zoom out. Like, this is just one, what we're talking about is one tiny piece of one aspect of one game and one really in-game economy. The way that we spend real hard-earned cash on digital products.
I love it. And I think this is a good abstraction that we can use here. Moms, if you're listening, this is how the world is changing. Everything is moving online. People are going to be involved in their times and their lives where all they're doing is changing ones and zeros on a hard drive somewhere. And yet it's so motivating to them that they're willing to spend real-world currency to change those ones and zeros on a hard drive somewhere. And so we're going to talk about why they want to spend money and what the right ways to do it are.
Hopefully the right ways, like just the ways that we've been doing it. But like specifically, let's talk about like the different economies that exist in different games. Like,
yes.
Any parent that is listening to my voice right now that has a child over the age of, I'm going to say 11, has been asked for real-world money for fake things. And so if this hasn't impacted you yet, give it a couple years.
You know, and you can think of this in terms of displacement. Like, I remember when I was a kid, the kind of things that I wanted money for and I would ask my parents for, and my kids don't ask me for money for those things. They want digital things.
All right, Ben, I'm going to go deep for a second here. And one of the things that I am quite literally the most ashamed of ever having done in my entire life, I stole $5 from my grandmother's wallet to buy Pogs.
Yeah. Okay, Pogs is a great example. I feel like the digital marketplace has completely supplanted the need and desire for kids to collect Pogs. I don't think it could exist today. Do you still have those Pogs? Are they the Pogs of shame?
Of course I don't. But I will say that she knew that I did it because it was like either later that day or the next day, she then gave me $5. Like, we were randomly standing there and she goes, "Here, I want you to have this $5." I'm like, "Oh, no, Grandma, I can't take it." She's like, "No, I want you to have that, and I want you to spend that on something that you want." And Ben,
that's
just
sad.
Oh, the crippling shame has
your grandmother executed a perfectly choreographed guilt trip.
There is no stronger aversion I have to stealing or petty shoplifting than that memory of my grandmother like shaming me for just in private acknowledging that I took $5 from her.
Wow.
That's
hardcore.
That hurts me to this day. And Grandma, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we have created these digital worlds where we go and exist with other human beings. And I would like to, speaking of abstractions and zooming out, I think that the fundamental ideas of microeconomics are right up there with like the laws of physics.
Oh, yes. The way that people derive utility and then exchange that utility between each other. I mean, that's one of the defining things of human civilization.
Right.
Like, it's so deep. Like you said it perfectly. Like the laws of physics, this is like the laws of physics for how people deal with each other.
Right. So we create this invisible world, this world that exists in a digital space, and then people come in, usually with some type of controlled identity, and now they are participating in this space.
Well, now hang on a second, Ben. You're talking about different things here. Like there's different worlds and different types of worlds with different rules, and we can separate all of these. Like for example, like an RPG is going to have a way different
role playing game,
a game where it's like a sandbox. You go in and you do whatever you want, or within the bounds of the game, or whatever. But a game where you are playing a character and you get to do different things is going to have a vastly different economy and economic impact on the real world than
a collectible trading card game.
Than a trading card game, or even like a multiplayer competitive shooter, which is a whole different genre of things. Like from the outside, if you're not a video game person, they all look identical. But
so say Magic the Gathering Arena or Fortnite or World of Warcraft.
Man, but Magic the Gathering Arena has a different in-game economy than Magic the Gathering Online, which has a different economy than Magic the Gathering, the paper card game.
Yeah. Well, what we're trying to make sense of here, and what they're doing, is that Magic Gathering Arena was trying to mimic other online collectible trading card games, and they were a recent entry. And so they were trying to avoid some of the problems that people were having in those other games. And by avoiding those problems, they created new problems.
I mean, that's one take on it. The other take is that all right, so first of all, we have to start. If we're going to start with Magic, then we have to start at the beginning.
All right.
Magic the Gathering, the paper card game, is, we're going to talk about loot boxes later, but that's the original loot box. You pay hard-earned cash for a pack of random cardboard cards. In those, I remember when I first...
It was the killer feature that made this collectible trading card game more than just the next Monopoly.
It was basically gambling. And it's exactly like gambling. You put in a fixed dollar amount, and then there is a random reward that you get based on the cards that you open. Because
that could be very big or very small.
Now there are multiple different kinds of packs with different distributions of cards. But when I started, there was only one pack. It was 15 cards, 3 uncommons, 1 rare. And that was it. And like you paid hard cash for these 15 cards, and you were just hoping that you got a rare that was what you wanted or was worth the value that you'd put in for that pack.
Yeah, and that proposition that there was a higher expected value than the cost that you invested is what kept you coming back. It's the loot box hook.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about loot boxes. I have a whole thing about loot boxes. But
sure.
What made Magic interesting and different was the fact that after you bought these physical cards, they were yours. You owned them. The only time that you had to pay the manufacturer was upfront for the random hand assortment of cards. After that, it completely shifted because I own these cards now, and if I want, I can trade them with other players, or I can even go online and list these for sale because these are my property and I have that right. And so there's an entire enormous secondary market that exists for these paper cards. You can go online and there's hundreds of stores that specialize in doing nothing but selling specific cards. I can pay $3, $4, $5 for a pack of random cards, or I can get the card that I know I need for a fixed price from this website. And so the whole secondary market comes into play.
And then you put the laws of economics on top of that, supply and demand, and whatever forces are happening in the game or the collectible market that make people want a card, if the demand for a card goes up and the supply doesn't go up, then the price goes up.
The perfect example is the most broken card of Magic that has ever been printed was Oko Thief of Crowns. And you, sir, you invested hard cash monies into buying a playset of these cards, didn't you?
I like how you never stop rubbing this in. Yeah, let's just give the specifics. I think I bought 3 of those at $35, and right now they're worth $10.
And this is the thing, they're worth $10 because the manufacturer decided, you know what, this card is way too good, and they banned it from play in every format. And so you can't even. So when you bought the card, it was worth $35 because it was so good in the game. But then literally the rules of the game changed, the value plummeted, and you have no way of recouping your losses.
And that's like, people might consider that a betrayal by the manufacturer because they understand that the secondary market exists and that they need to take it seriously when they do something like that, because I lost, a significant amount of investment because of their actions.
I have a couple of comments about Wizards interacting with its own secondary market, but those are going to come at the end once we know the whole picture.
Okay, the collectible trading card game exists. Now we want to translate that into the digital world. How do we do it?
And so they did that in the late 90s, early 2000s with Magic the Gathering Online.
Yes.
And they initially set it up, and Magic the Gathering Online is great, and I like it. Like, it's not as it's definitely aged like fine milk. But the fact is they set up a very robust system. It's very similar to real world. In fact, it's almost identical. You can buy the packs that are digital-only packs in the game, and you open these digital packs with the same distributions of random cards, and they belong to you. They get associated to your account, and they're added to your collection. And, importantly, they allowed you to trade with other players on the digital client, which then allows for the entire secondary market to exist again. The same way I said that there are whole businesses built on selling single paper actual cardboard cards, those same businesses also sell the digital versions of those cards for real world money.
Yeah, and a lot of the same market forces exist for the digital market, in that if it's good in the game in paper, it's going to be good in the game digitally, which means generally the same cards are in demand in both markets.
Another interesting fact is because certain events in the game require entry fees. Like they call them tickets, and tickets are $1. $1 gets you one ticket in the game. And so there's almost a direct one-to-one comparison of what the in-game currency, what you have to pay to get a digital version of the card is versus what that translates to in real-world dollars.
Now, one interesting thing about Magic Online is that they don't artificially inject cards into the market. They just make it available to buy booster packs, and then you open random booster packs, and then the cards enter the market. Just like in the real world, except the fact that they don't actually have to print them. So there can be more digitally than there are in the real world, or less. And sometimes when that happens, like if a set's not popular, but there's one card that's in very high demand, it could be less available on Magic Online than it is in the real world. And then the digital card could cost more than the real world card.
Interesting. Little nuances like that happen, but like what you're talking about most of the time is that the real world price of the cardboard generally closely correlates to what the Magic Online price is going to be, with a handful of exceptions.
Yes, I think it was a brilliant move by them to basically have their online game mimic their real world game. And it created a lot of the same things.
It did, which is what the players like. And this is the problem, is because Wizards, the manufacturer of this game, has no control over the secondary market.
Now, there are two things that can happen in that kind of environment if you're not careful, and that is if people can continually open as many booster packs as they want, it would introduce more and more and more and more cards into the environment and depress the price and ruin the secondary market. Or, okay, so what Magic did, that's absolutely brilliant, is they made it so that for a limited amount of time, if you collected all of the cards in a single set, you could redeem them to Wizards of the Coast. You basically say, here's my digital account, here's all 256 cards in this set, and then they would remove those digital objects from your digital collection and send you physical real-world equivalents.
This is win-win for everybody. It's a win for me, the collector, because now I can translate these digital items into real-world items, which is more desirable most of the time, at least for old guys like us that want the paper. And like you're talking about, it fixes the supply problem or the oversupply problem and the depreciation problem because it's removing the digital assets from the collective existence.
Yes. So there's approximately $55 worth of overhead in like the fee and the shipping costs. So as long as the digital value of a set is worth less than that X of how much all the cards are worth plus $50, they'll just stay on Magic Online. But once the expected value of a set of cards equals X plus 50, then it is now worth it to take the card. You'll achieve excess value by selling the cards out of your collection. And then that keeps the prices level across between digital and real world.
So we're getting really esoteric, but the idea is that we have paper Magic, which has a secondary market, and then we have Magic Online, which has basically close to the same thing.
I think we're laying the groundwork here. There's one other thing I want to say about this.
Okay.
When you enter an event on Magic Online, the same as you do in real life, you have to pay an entry fee, and the entry fee is used to give the prizes. And as long as the sum total of how much all of the players entering an event is less than the sum total that they give out in prizes, then they're not adding more and more and more into the environment.
Yeah, they're just this is the Vegas thing. The house always wins.
Right. And it's not just so they can make money. It's also so that the digital economy doesn't get depressed. So
I'm
these two
skeptical
things, the set redemption and the fees not totaling the number of the prizes, are mechanisms that exist that are like gold sinks. And I'm laying that groundwork because as we talk about other things, any healthy online economy will have some type of gold sink that takes back things that could be created for free out of the environment.
Now, let's take this situation that Wizards, the manufacturer, finds itself in. They have a successful game. They have a successful online version of that game. And the problem, from their perspective, is that there's a ton of value that is being exchanged on a secondary market sans the manufacturer.
Right. They're not getting any of that action.
Like I said, there are businesses that were founded and are functioning on the profit of just working the secondary market. So how do we fix that? Easy. We remove the secondary market entirely from the equation. Enter Magic the Gathering Arena.
You think that was the whole impetus for it?
No, that was not the whole impetus, but that was definitely something that they thought about because of the way they implemented it.
I mean, it also felt like they wanted to create a next generation platform that used animations and competed with some of the other newer collectible trading card games online without throwing out the whole old system.
So we've talked about this before, but anybody that's not familiar, Magic the Gathering has two versions, two flavors of online play that you can do. There's the Magic the Gathering Online, which, like I said, was made in late 90s, early 2000s, and it feels like that. It is not something I recommend for beginners, and it's like if you want to play Magic, go play Magic the Gathering Online. But if you want a good user interface, if you want cool animations, if you want it to feel like more of an exciting video game environment, you play the new offering, which is only a handful of years old now, and that's Magic the Gathering Arena.
Okay.
But when they implemented this, they made a very specific and deliberate decision that there would be no trading between players on this client. And that changes everything.
It changes everything. Because Magic the Gathering is the oldest collectible trading card game, and they took collectible trading card game and took out the T.
Yeah, no trading, which means no secondary market, no opportunity to use my real world currency on a third party website to get the cards that I want for my collection. The only way, like if I'm playing Magic Arena, to get the cards that I want/need
is to give more money to them.
Is to give them more money in one way or another. And every mechanism that they have built into the system, at the bottom line, the first step is you've got to feed cash into it.
Yeah. So I heard a somewhat cynical take on this, and that is if you need a card, the only way to get that card is to open more random packs. And it can be excessively frustrating if you're trying to get a card of very limited rarity to continually open packs hoping to get that card. Now, in their defense, they introduced something called wild cards.
So yes, they have every rarity of card. There's common, uncommon, rare, and mythic rare. Super rare. They have wild cards that you can randomly open, or as you open packs, you also accrue. Like there's a little wheel that, like, even if you don't open a rare wild card, every 6 packs you open will give you a rare wild card. Which is them, like, it's Wizards acknowledging the fact that, well, we want you to. They're incentivizing us to keep opening packs. Whether or not we get the cards we want, we always feel like we're making progress towards the cards we want because, well, even if this pack sucks, you're still getting a little bit closer to the wild cards you need to finish out that deck.
So I saw one commentator that was giving kind of a cynical take on this, and they said basically based on the math of opening a pack, it will cost you roughly $30 to get a rare wild card of how many packs you have to open. Now, if you open that many packs, you might just get the card you were looking for anyway. But let's say you open that many packs, you don't get the card you were looking for, and you finally get a rare wild card. $30 for one particular rare, if you compare that to the economy of, secondary market, that's insidiously high.
Like
insidiously, I mean.
$30 for one card is maybe, like, Ben, the best card that was ever printed in Magic was $35 a copy. Right. So getting $30 for any rare, and this is the real kicker of this, is like for people that aren't understanding why we're so upset about this. I looked today as we are recording, I went online and found one of the top decks that's currently playing in Standard right now, and counted the number of rares and mythics that you would need to make that deck. And what I found was,
all right, so let me give the other half of this while you're looking for it. The other half was that if you were to open random packs based on the rarity of getting a mythic wild card, it would cost you $120 of just opening packs until you get a mythic wild card so that you can get the mythic that you're looking for.
Okay.
Now, if you open up $120 worth of packs, you're probably going to get at least the mythic you're looking for, but still.
Hopefully. Now, right now, the top deck in Standard, according to Magic Top 8 or whatever, is Naya Aggro. And for reference, that has 53 rares and 6 mythics.
Okay.
So
if you were to say you open random packs and you didn't get any of those cards, and you wanted to do that simply with wild cards, and you open enough packs to get that many wild cards, you're talking like $8,000 to build that deck.
Now, and this has been a complaint of the community for a long time, that it's ridiculous that it would take that much. And I've said on this podcast before, I played Magic Arena like nonstop for 2 years, and the pinch point is rares. Competitive decks take a ton of rares, and if you're just opening packs all the time, you're just feeding money into this digital machine for goods that cost the manufacturer nothing to generate. Not nothing.
Right.
They're probably fractions of a cent to make the server online or whatever, but still nothing.
Now, I don't think it's cynical to say this, but this is exactly what they were hoping for. They just didn't expect there to be so much friction over it. And that is, you look, like you and I pointed out a little while ago, the number one portion of the gaming market right now is mobile games that are built around these kinds of free-to-play, pay-to-win kind of environments. And they wanted Magic the Gathering Arena to become that.
This is true. What they didn't realize is that their player base are the nerdiest of the nerds. So not only are we going to analyze the giving or the offerings that they have put out for us, but we're going to do the math. Like this, I'm an accountant. You're a computer science guy. Like, we are not, like, there are multiple PhDs that play this game on a daily basis. You think a guy with a math degree isn't going to sit down and apply that to everything that has to do with Magic, the game that he plays?
In their defense, it's got to be so hard to try to do anything right with that many smart people criticizing every move you make. And that's one of the fundamental laws of Magic.
Which takes me back to this article that spawned this entire conversation. One of the things that they said in this article that was them, from their perspective, being generous, and from the player's perspective, a slap in the face, was they said they're going to create a thing in the game where you can just buy wild cards directly for real world money.
Yeah, so it was for $50, you could get 12 rare wild cards and 4 mythic wild cards, which is a huge EV, expected value. If you wanted to buy that, if you wanted to open packs, get that many wild cards, you could expect to spend $840. And you're getting it for the low price of $50.
Well, now hang on a second. Like, to make the deck that I was talking about earlier, that same Naya aggro deck, that's $250 in.
Okay, you'd have to open 5 of those bundles.
You have to buy 5 of those bundles in order to get the wild cards for it. Now, somebody else did the other math, like, haha, because we do the math on Magic. And for $50 in the game, like, if you translated that to the other in-game currency they have, because this is a trick. All right, so parents, listen up. This is a trick for you for a second. That the game is shady when you can't just buy things directly. If you have to buy in-game currency with your real-world currency and then buy the thing that you want in the game with the in-game currency, that's what casinos in Vegas do. Casinos make you
They print their own money.
Yes, exactly. So you know that they are making money regardless, and they're trying to swindle you out of it if you have to buy their currency first. So if in Magic Arena you spent $50 on in-game currency and bought packs, you would be able to get 46 packs. And based on the fact, like I said, opening packs accrues random wild cards just as you're opening them, you would get 3 mythic wild cards and 9 rare wild cards, aside from all the cards that you opened.
Right.
So, like, again, like, yeah, the rares, like buying the rare pack is a more direct route to getting the things that you want, but it might not be the better one.
All right, now clarify something for me because I don't play enough Arena to understand this. Arena did a thing where they were basically making it so you don't accumulate in excess. Since you can't trade anyway, there's no reason for you to ever have more than 4 of any one card. So what happens when you open a pack with a 5th copy of a card you already have 4 of?
The first answer is you never will. So if you're opening random packs, just like you bought packs and you're opening them, if the rare that you got would have been a rare that you already have 4 copies of, it gives you a wild card instead.
A rare wild card.
A wild card of that rarity. If you are drafting, if I am sitting in a draft, which is all I do on Arena, is all I do on this client is draft, and you pick a card that you already have 4 copies of, it does not give you a wild card of that rarity. It gives you gems, which is the in-game currency, and it is a pittance. Like, you, for one rare wild, I think you have to get something like 5 cards, 5 rare cards of a rare that you already have 4 copies of or more before you can get 1 pack.
Okay. Wow. That's really terrible.
Yeah, so there's no incentive for like, in the aggregate, if all you do every day,
so
all
opening
day,
a 5th copy of a rare or a mythic in a draft feels really bad.
It feels really bad. And there's no reason to take it unless it's going to fix your deck, but then that's a whole nother conversation.
Okay, so the article that Wizards of the Coast published basically says, we understand that the economic system we chose in this new product has some limitations, that it's causing some frictions and frustrations in the community. And up to this point, we've just sitting back and watching, trying to figure out what to do, and we're ready to enter the debate now.
I mean, that's your version. My take on it was like, oh, we understand.
That's what they said.
What my take on that whole article was, we understand that there's frustration, so here's a way that is less frustrating but equally profitable for us.
Maybe. Wizards has been good amongst their developers and their creative team of kind of understanding that this game is different things to different people. Creative types find it as a way to express their creativity. Competitive types find it a way to be competitive. Powerful gaming enjoyer guys or art or story or all those things get different itches scratched by this. And they're kind of saying Magic the Gathering Arena doesn't scratch the itch for two of those groups. Like, if you want to collect everything, it's virtually impossible. And if you want to switch decks and try whatever's good right now, you almost can't.
There's a couple other things that they do that are just deliberate kicks in the teeth. Like, for example, what they've started doing with, we talked about this a couple episodes ago, is they now have a rotating format called Alchemy, where they will take cards that they think are broken or too powerful in their printed version, and they will tweak them, and they will change them ever so slightly to balance them correctly, okay?
Yeah, they also have ones that have mechanics that you couldn't execute in a paper copy and do a digital version.
Understood, which makes the game more fun and flavorful for an online digital client. But of course, that's spinning off a whole separate game that is digital Magic that can't exist in the real world. But that's a different discussion. What I'm talking specifically is cards that they change. Because, Ben, what if me, Johnny Strapped for Cash over here, takes my precious few rare wild cards and I translate those, because this is the other thing. Once you use the wild card to create a card, you cannot go back. You cannot take your rares or your mythics that you crafted and turn them back into wild cards. There is no mechanism for that.
I think that's the main problem when you take the T out of a CTG, a collectible trading card game. If you take the trading out, you introduce this problem where you don't have flexibility, you can't change.
Well,
you can't derive value out of the thing you've accumulated.
Man, I haven't even landed my plane on this, and you're already seeing problems with it. When I'm landing my plane is me, Johnny Strapped for Cash again. I translate my wild cards in a one-way transaction into 4 copies of a card that I think is awesome, and I want it perfectly in my deck for this new format. And then Wizards goes and changes the words that are printed on that wild card, and I don't get a refund. That's another thing that the community was up in arms about. Like, how are you going to take this card that I sweated blood for in this digital client and then just change it, and I can't use it anymore, and not give me any of my value back?
That's kind of the same thing that happened when they banned my Oko.
But when they banned your Oko, it was the secondary market that got screwed, not the primary, not Wizards, and not the primary direct users. Wizards is 100% in control of this entire transaction, including the amount of money that I had to pay to get those cards in the first place. You paid, you got screwed, but the local game store benefited. The manufacturer didn't. This time, it's the manufacturer. The guy who is the one making these changes in the first place is the one benefiting.
That's interesting. That's a really cynical way to look at that, but it's probably right. All right, I want to zoom out a couple of levels here because I want to abstract some of these things in a way that can apply to anything.
Okay.
So, money eliminates the double coincidence of wants. If you're bartering for things and I produce something and I have someone else that produces something, the only way that a transaction can really happen that'll be satisfactory to both of us is if I need what he's producing and he needs what I'm producing.
I've had this exact discussion with my kids multiple times. Money does 2 things. It is a common medium of exchange, which means we don't have to argue over how many goats your pairs of shoes are worth, because we're both just going to translate the shoes and the goats into a common medium, the dollar. How much dollars does your goat cost versus how much dollars these shoes cost? And second, money carries value through time. I have goats today, but I need shoes next week. If I give you my goats now, are you guaranteed to give me the shoes next week? Who knows? Maybe the prices of either one of those things fluctuates in the meantime, and then you don't hold up your end of the bargain. But the dollar, I can translate my goats to dollars right now and then go get the shoes when I need them.
Right. There's also the coincidence piece, and that is maybe you don't have the shoes in the right size or you don't need goats. So
there's also that. It's like I need shoes, but you don't want goats, so now I'm just kind of screwed.
Right. But there is still an area in our life where we barter, where it requires a double coincidence of wants, and that's our romantic lives. You have to want them, and they have to want you.
I don't think that's true. I think every man wants every woman, and every woman only wants a handful of men. So
okay, it still requires a double coincidence of wants.
No, this goes back to women have all the sex and men have to get it from them.
Now, when you have a currency system that exists, there also comes problems that come along with it that you can't control. You imagine, all right, I'm going to be digital king for a day. I'm going to set up my digital kingdom. I'm going to set up my digital currency. I'm going to control the way currency enters and leaves my environment. Everything is within my control, and I'll prevent all these problems from happening. Oh my gosh, no.
That's not a thing that happens, no. Like economies, in-game economies are real economies.
So with Magic the Gathering, like I was reading about this today, one of the things that can happen on Magic the Gathering Online because of the secondary market is that people will take a stolen credit card, they'll use it to buy tickets, they'll sell those tickets to unwitting users, and then between the time that the credit card becomes known as being a stolen credit card, they've already exchanged that for cash. And now they have money, and if Wizards of the Coast figures out that it was bought with a fraudulent credit card, they take it away from the person that bought the tickets rather than the person that sold them.
That's a lovely money laundering scheme that exists.
Yeah,
in your
using Magic the Gathering Online for laundering money.
Outstanding.
So don't buy tickets from people. Buy them from bots from reputable sellers. But yes.
Oh, okay. While we're zooming out and talking about these things, we have to talk about the original, the OG in-game economy.
Go ahead.
You know what I'm talking about?
Eve?
EVE Online, yes.
Yeah.
EVE, all right, so for those people who haven't heard about it, is an MMORPG, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game where you log in, you are the pilot of a spaceship, and you exist in a perpetual, ongoing, ever-changing universe with all the other players that have spaceships and are doing things. And the fascinating thing about this is that it's almost an open, completely in-game economy where just anything goes. And again, just like the r/place, it's this great microcosm of the coolest crap that has ever happened in online history has happened in EVE Online. The free market exists because there's things that people want, and you can manufacture a lot of those things just using time and effort in the game. And so some people just specialize into collecting these materials that other players want, and then they sell them at a profit. And others specialize in just manufacturing a specific, like, rare component en masse on scale and selling those for profit. Like all these,
right? And whatever there's scarcity of, the price goes up, and then there's demand for it, and then people are willing to put in the effort to get it and sell it to other people. And the laws of economics that apply to the physical world also apply to the digital world.
But one of the coolest things that's happened is that the makers of the game allow you to buy in-game time with in-game currency. So this is a subscription-based game. You have to pay so much real-world money every month in order to keep playing. Or you can spend in-game currency at the going rate for that same amount of play time in the game. Which is, as a side note, the best of both worlds. Like, I don't have a lot of time. I don't want to grind up a bunch of cash, but I've got a bunch of excess cash, so I'm going to buy a couple of these time codes, put them on sale in the in-game like marketplace, and get a bunch of in-game currency for them. The flip side, I'm a student. I've got a ton of time but no money. If I can just play and have fun and grind in this game and get enough in-game currency, I can keep paying for my subscription to keep playing it for free. Free with air quotes. But what also happens is that you can now translate dollar for dollar the in-game currency and what that translates to in US dollars. And so in EVE Online, some of the most expensive things that exist can only be manufactured by players. And like we're talking about like capital ships, like giant, enormous spacecraft. And the real world cost of these, if you translate the currency, is something like anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 per spaceship. And these players will have wars where literally tens of thousands of dollars of actual money, stuff that's worth real world cash, is destroyed for fun. Blows my mind.
I love that you brought that up, because that is another functional thing of what I was talking about. It's a gold sink. If they're spending all this time and money and introducing new digital objects into this environment, it's just inflating and inflating and inflating indefinitely. But if they go crash these things into each other, blow them up, and it's destroyed, that's taken out of the economy and it keeps it down.
So the reason that I love bringing this up as a concept is because the makers of this game very deliberately made it an open world economy. Like, we just want the economy in this game to do what it wants. They haven't openly said, but they've very heavily implied that if players want to do Ponzi schemes or be con artists, they are free to do so in the game. We don't care. And they took it to the next level. This game was launched in 2003. And in 2007, they hired an economist, not a computer scientist, not a developer, not a programmer, not a guy that is a game developer with an economics degree on the side, In actual real world, all he does is economics.
To evaluate the in-game economy?
To evaluate, monitor, and report on the in-game economy and what tweaks or things that they should be doing from the outside to keep it balanced. This guy, whose name I cannot pronounce because he's Nordic, he was hired from, he was a dean of faculty of business and science at the University of, that's a word that I can't pronounce, Akureyri? I'll put it in the show notes. And then he worked at that company being their in-game economist for 7 years. He left in 2014 to be the rector at the same university that he left. Like,
I bet he gives all kinds of lectures to his university students about real-world lessons that can be learned from this online economy.
There are so many things that I know about. I played EVE for like a month, but there are so many amazing articles and documentaries that I've watched on YouTube about some of the crap that has happened in EVE Online that I could talk about it for hours. I will not subject you to that.
But you were just talking about how they can just go, oh, just whatever happens, happens, and they don't have to worry about it. But as I started to read about this, I realized they can't do that. The game developer is not free from consequences of things that are happening in their world. For instance, I was reading about World of Warcraft and how as that game became monetized and the in-game resource for that became very valuable, they started to have instances where people would hack into other players' accounts, sell off all of their valuable resources, and then before they were found out, and then they would have accumulated real-world money by the transfer of digital goods.
So, World of Warcraft has since adopted the EVE model, where you can buy in-game time with in-game currency, and that's eliminated a lot of the secondary market stuff. But when I was playing, there was an active secondary market, very shady, very black market stuff, where you could spend real-world currency, usually on Chinese websites, and meet one of their characters in the game, and they would trade you a ton of in-game currency. I have been ripped off multiple times where I sent money into the ether and it was gone, never to be seen again. I have, and at the same time, I've had an equal number of successful transactions where I don't have enough time for this. I just want the in-game currency so I can do the things that I want to do, and I don't want to grind up for it.
Yeah, you're right. That's what you're actually trading for, is real-world money for not having to spend time playing the game to get the resources.
Yeah. That's all I can say about that.
Okay, so what Magic the Gathering Arena was trying to do, because I saw this as I was reading about Magic the Gathering Online, where there was fraud and money laundering and stuff going on. They're like, you know what, if we could just get out of the secondary market business altogether and try to adopt the business model of these mobile games that are just raking in cash hand over foot because they have this great intellectual property that they've already developed and spent all the time and resources and research on, and now we can just have players have to give us more money to get what they want instead of having to give other people on a secondary market more money. It's interesting to have that dilemma that they look at the secondary market as a place where money's being made on their product that they're not getting enough of, so they want to just bring that all in-house, and how it wasn't that easy.
Yes, and there's multiple ways that they're doing it. Magic the Gathering Arena is one. It's the digital version where there is no secondary market. They are the only place where you can get this stuff. There are other instances of this too. For example, for the entire life of Magic the Gathering, you couldn't go to the manufacturer and buy a specific card. You can't call up Wizards of the Coast and say, hey, I need a playset of Oko. What's your price? That didn't exist.
Right.
Until it did.
They're like, go open packs.
Yeah, go open packs. Until it did. They introduced a thing, a year or two ago now, called Secret Lairs.
Secret Lair, yeah.
This is basically every once in a while.
It's not exactly what you're saying, but yeah.
But no, hang on a second. Secret Lair is a thing where they'll take a handful of cards and they'll offer premium versions of those cards with alternate art, or it'll be something that's like a crossover with the Godzilla stuff. They have different...
Sure, that you cannot get by opening packs.
Right. And here's the thing, Ben. The same way that alchemy, like this weird format where they're changing and doing digital only cards, was like like their toe in the water of, well, let's get out of the paper Magic game entirely. Secret Lair is Wizards of the Coast dipping their toes in the water of, could we sell singles and get away with it?
Do you think that's what they wanted to do? Okay, let's go back 2 years in time when COVID-19 was just starting to hit. You were like, what's this going to be? Some people are saying it could last 18 months to 2 years. That couldn't possibly happen. Here we are 2 years later, and we're finally coming out of it. And right about that time, there was a lot of friction in organized play for Magic the Gathering. They had developed a Pro Tour. Magic the Gathering Arena was trying to come out. They were trying to decide if maybe they could expand their market by getting more into e-gaming, get streamers and tap into a lot of gamers that are out there that were potential customers for Magic the Gathering that weren't yet playing it. And then COVID-19 came along, and they thought, here's our chance. We're going to shut down all of the money and all the time that we're spending on feeding and caring for our customers who already play the paper game and try to expand into the digital market. So they completely closed down the Pro Tour, all the money that they spent on prizes and events and things for that, and put all of that emphasis onto Magic the Gathering Arena.
Interesting. That's a good take on it. And honestly, what you just said explains a couple of the things that I wanted to bring up as weirdness. For example, Magic Gathering right now, the manufacturer presents pre-constructed decks. Like, you can go to the store, you can go to Walmart, and you can buy like an entire deck of cards for Standard with their Challenger decks, or also Commander, which is quote-unquote the most popular type of Magic that people ever play. You can buy those. I actually bought a Commander deck recently, and you haven't wanted to play with me. Driving me a little nuts, so that's fine. That's fine. But that's the only time that Wizards sells like pre-constructed decks directly. But what is not included in these, and what is interestingly missing, is a code or some kind of like redemption
connection to the digital world.
Yes. If I spend hard-earned cash on the paper product, why can't I get a digital version of all these cards in either one or both of the online clients?
Great question.
Now, the professor at the Tolarian Community College. Yeah, his name is Brian Lewis. He's a YouTube channel that talks about Wizards of the Coast and products, and he's great. Go watch him if you have any interest in games like this. He is a nerd's nerd. I really like watching him.
Yeah. He doesn't pull his punches either, so he's fair. If something's good, he calls it good, and if it's not, he'll say why. He
had this great take on this exact problem, where they're not including digital redemption codes in their paper products. It's that there's no reason not to. One, the digital assets cost Wizards of the Coast nothing to generate. And two, all it would do, the only thing it would do, is take people who play paper Magic and bought paper decks, and it would introduce them and give them incentive to try out the online version, which is only going to benefit Wizards. And vice versa, somebody that does nothing but play online, if he wants some of the cards that exist in one of those pre-constructed decks, he could go buy a physical product, get the digital version that he wants, and then now he also has this paper deck lying around. Maybe he could gateway into paper Magic.
So I watched the same video that you're talking about, and I'm going to challenge that idea that you just said, and I'm going to make you proxy for him.
Okay.
Because you said it would cost them nothing. And yes, the idea that doing something in your digital environment costs you nothing is kind of easy to grasp. It's not really the truth. If they have players that play on Magic the Gathering Arena and they want to get a deck, and in order to get that deck, they either got to buy one of these $50 wildcard bundles, or they got to open $80 worth of packs, or you can go buy a physical copy of it and get a physical copy of it and a code that gives you a digital copy of it. There's definitely an opportunity cost there.
Yes, my counter argument to that is that Wizards is still in control of every piece of that transaction. So, like the Challenger decks, like the whole video that we're talking about is Brian Lewis breaking down the real world value. Like the Challenger decks have a fixed MSRP. What does that translate to in the secondary market for how much each card costs?
Like one of them costs $30 in real life, but in the secondary market, if you break down all the pieces, it's worth $105.
Right, and that's the absolute best case scenario. And he admits openly that each one of those decks is not something you wouldn't take that Challenger deck straight to a tournament and play that because it's suboptimal. Wizards of the Coast deliberately made a deck that isn't perfectly tuned the way that a competitive deck would be.
So you'd still have to buy more cards in order to optimize.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's not going to be, will there be some players that would just buy the product and like benefit from having the game? Yes, it would. But it still benefits Wizards because they're just playing more of their content. They're just like the longer that you sit at the slot machine, the more money you're inevitably going to end up putting into it.
I really am sympathetic with both sides of this argument, of them doing things that kind of optimize getting the most money possible from their customer base versus just, I suppose, the other end of that idealism would be making the best possible game at the lowest possible price and assuming that it will just be so popular that it'll bring in more customers and they'll make up for the lost funding of doing devious things with just increased volume.
Well, I'm a super skeptical and cynical person. And honestly, I would have a lot more respect for Wizards if they just said what they meant. Like this article that came out, I felt like was them like putting on the sunglasses, like on the subtext. It's like, guys, just admit that you hate the fact that a secondary market exists for your product and you're trying to destroy it in every way possible because that's what your corporate overlords want. If we know that's your motivation, then at least we have a clear understanding of what it is that you're trying to do.
Well, on the other side of that cynicism, recently one of the best advocates for the game, Johnny Magic, what is his last name?
I know
Finkel.
John Finkel.
Finkel. Was recently put on the board of directors, I think, at Hasbro, the corporate giant that owns Wizards of the Coast. So, you think a player's player, and I'll tell a story about him in just a sec, getting on the board gives hope that it isn't just these, devious corporate overlords that are trying to squeeze every last drop of blood from this turnip at the expense of the core players who've loved the game for all their life. We're going to complain no matter what. Another thing that happened this week to give us a little hope is they've reinstated competitive in-person paper Magic.
Yay! The Pro Tour is back somehow by some organizer that I've never heard of with no set schedule for when things are going to take place yet. Yeah, it's exciting, but still, like I wanted way more details than they were ready to offer me.
So back in 2018, when I had made day 2 of Grand Prix New Jersey, I'd finished for the day and I'd gone out and all I had to do was go get in my car and do the 6-hour drive back to Norfolk before class started on Monday. So I basically had 18 hours, but I needed 6 of that I needed to do driving and I needed to get some sleep before I had to be in class the next morning. And I wasn't allowed to be on leave or anything like that. I had to be back 8 a.m. Monday morning. So I come out of the event center and there's a man in front of me in a hoodie with the hood up and he's arguing with an Uber driver.
Like you do.
So the car that has its window down, the man's arguing with the Uber driver, and I kind of stopped for a second, listen, because it's a New York argument. It was kind of novel. Like, what do you mean you won't? And so they're arguing over the fact that the Uber driver, that the passenger wants the Uber driver to take them over the bridge into New York City. So we're in New Jersey, on the mainland of the U.S., and he wants to go over the bridge. He's like, why did you even take my ride? It's not like, Uber doesn't tell the driver before they pick up the rider where they're going to be going. So what had happened is the driver pulled up and then told the rider he didn't want to take him where he was supposed to take him.
And so, but it's the rider's responsibility to cancel, or else it looks bad at me, the driver.
Yeah. So there's no one else around. There's just this driver arguing with this passenger, and the driver's like, well, I'm not doing it, and he drives off. And the passenger kind of just kicks the ground and then turns around, and I realize I'm standing as close to him as I am to my microphone here. It's John Finkel.
Oh my God, it's John Finkel. Did you just shout that at the top of your lungs?
No, but what I really wanted to say in that moment is, John, I'll take you to New York City.
Oh, Ben, you didn't? I would totally...
I was so close.
Oh, you totally
if there's a multiverse where like different outcomes split out, there's an outcome where I took John to New York City and we're friends on social media now.
Listeners, jump cut with me for a second. Like the scene goes wavy and then we see a mega yacht. And as we zoom in to the man that with this miraculous tan in his swim trunks lounging by the pool on the back of his yacht, and it's none other than Ben Rich. And the back of the yacht says USS Good at Magic.
So there's an alternate universe where I gave John Finkel a ride into New York City, but I didn't that day.
And he dumped all of his knowledge into you, and you became an ultra successful professional Magic gathering player.
I sometimes daydream about the conversations on that ride, Josh.
oh, the path not taken. Oh, Ben, the opportunity cost.
Yeah, it's painful. All right, so let's land the plane on the digital economies thing.
So digital economies are real. I said at the beginning we were going to talk about a bunch of different ones. We ended up just ranting about Magic basically the entire time.
We talked about Magic, but we also talked about EVE. We talked about World of Warcraft.
We didn't even talk about the controversy of some game developers introducing loot boxes the same way that Magic Gathering packs are loot boxes, to the point where some countries have deemed them a version of gambling and have outlawed those games in their countries.
Yes, interesting point. Yes, that some countries in the world have actually outlawed this idea that you can get something you want, but the only way to get it is by opening a random chance of getting it.
Yes, because that is the definition of gambling, and this is gambling that's pseudo-legal for kids to take their parents' credit card and pump a ton of cash into this digital game that has no real-world value translation.
So if I were to sum it up, I'd say that the laws that we've revealed over time and through experience of humanity's experience with economics, that those laws are immutable and that they translate directly into a digital space. The controls are different, the inputs and outputs are different, but the laws are the same: supply and demand, scarcity.
Yes, and this is the foundation argument for everybody that's talking about, like we're saying, the $50 for the wild card pack in Magic Arena is a ripoff, because we're applying laws of supply and demand and taking examples from the same offerings from the same manufacturer and applying it to this one and saying this is crap compared to the other stuff that you are selling us.
Yeah, those kinds of articles are few and far between. They said that they're going to be doing that on a 6-week trial period. We'll see if after 6 weeks they issue another article and come clean or announce another correction.
They said
they're not going to introduce a secondary market. They're not going to do that. I'm predicting that right now. That will never happen.
No, that will never happen. And I don't care what trial period they say they're going to run. More than 0 people are going to pay $50 for 16 wild cards. So it's going to become a thing. They're just going to do that because it's...
Yeah, but it's not like they didn't think of that before now. They didn't want to do that before now. They're realizing they have to.
They're realizing, this is them throwing us a bone, but it's like the most measly bone that they've already scraped all the meat off of first.
And it still costs $50.
And it costs us $50, and it's just pure profit for them. Like, I know there's a non-zero cost to creating digital assets, but Ben, like, making ones and zeros, like, costs very, very little.
Yeah, when I was researching this, I was astonished at the amount of human capital that's required to deal with the negative economic fallout from these online economies. The investigations, the fraud, like, for instance, World of Warcraft eventually had to introduce a security token that you would buy for $10 and they would send it to you, and then it would constitute 2-factor authentication for logging into your account and protect your digital assets. And then all of a sudden your online gaming account was more secure than your bank account.
Oh, I just downloaded the app, and they would. It was a random code.
Before the app existed, you could only do it with this token.
I want my online assets to be more secure than my bank account, Ben.
Josh, my Magic the Gathering online account probably has a value in excess of $2,000. So if someone hacked into my account, they could just trade all my cards away and sell them off for cash. And then even if Wizards recognized it and tried to give them back to me, they'd already gotten real world money for my digital assets.
This goes back to that story that I also love to tell that one of our listeners had, one of our friends that we met at Grand Prix Vegas, where somebody broke into his Las Vegas hotel room while he was there and stole a couple $100 cash and his credit cards out of his wallet and left the multi-$1,000 deck of cards sitting on the nightstand 3 inches from, like, the cash money that they stole.
That's a great story. It just shows. I think now, like, I watched Home Alone with my kids, and Marvin and Harry were casing the joint at the McAllister house, trying to figure, and they're looking at things like VCRs and stuff like, and electronics. And now if someone broke into your house, they'd probably leave that stuff alone.
I think, what would somebody even steal from my house?
I don't know. Like you said, your World of Warcraft account might be more valuable than all the electronics in your house.
That's the smart cap. The smart cap burglar steals your actual computer, like the whole box, unplugs everything, and just takes the box with him because all of your passwords are on there, all of your information's on there, your past tax returns are probably saved on there somewhere. That's the thing.
That's a weird takeaway from this discussion. Are we displacing real world wealth with digital wealth?
No.
I don't mean adding. I mean displacing. Like, maybe I might used to have accumulated things of physical value in my house, and now that same amount of money I would have spent on those are being spent online, and that money is displaced online.
That is absolutely the takeaway from this, is that people need to recognize that, like you're talking about right there, like it was a downside. People have World of Warcraft accounts that are more secure than their bank account. Well, some people have World of Warcraft accounts that are worth more than the money in their bank account. And that trend is probably only going to continue. I don't buy Blu-rays anymore. I buy them online.
And less likely to get fixed. You know, if someone hacks into your World of Warcraft and steals all your stuff, you're counting on Blizzard to like undo it and put it back the way it was.
Wow.
Whereas if someone hacked into my bank account and stole it, I'd feel pretty confident I could get it back.
Whoa. Hang on a second. Is this Ben Rich acknowledging that a large corporation has no incentive to help out its player base?
No, I'm not going to say that, because when I was reading these articles about World of Warcraft and all of this impact, they talked about the human capital that they had to hire in order to deal with all these things as they're happening, these frauds and things like that. You know, as a secondary market on World of Warcraft rose to prominence and Blizzard realized they couldn't just ignore it, it was causing these massive waves in their online economy. They'd open up a new server. Initially, there would be a huge scarcity. Prices would be sky high. Farmers would come in, create an excess of supply. Prices would plummet. It was chaos.
Outstanding. But back to our main takeaway. People need to be aware. If you listen to nothing what we said about Magic the Gathering Online or the arena or all the things that are wrong with that, like these lessons that we're talking about, everything is moving online. All of your real world assets are more and more going to be converted to digital assets that you own locked behind a password somewhere. And you need to be aware of how these things are governed and administered.
The thing that you said that's really blown my mind about this, and I've heard you say this before, is just really the ultimate trend. The only thing that can't be changed here is time, and you're trading money for time.
I'm always looking at the money for time equation, because that's the most valuable resource that me personally, Josh Fleshman, has in my life is time. If there is a way that I can trade money for time, I'm going to do it.
Well, I have a feeling this won't be the last time we visit this topic, but this is the deep dive. I feel like we've laid some of the groundwork for some of the concepts so we can refer back to them in the future. Audience, Mom, thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for listening. If you heard us talk about something that was of interest of you, if you feel like we missed something, if you want to add into the debate, you can go on our subreddit at r/badatmagic, or you can go on our Facebook page and you can join in the discussion. Let us know what you think.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good rating on the podcast player of your choice. It is crazy the amount of visibility we get from a single 5-star rating. And if you want Ben and I to take stupid games that we like to play in our spare time and extract that to real-world philosophical questions for the rest of, forever, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.